Scotland wrestled free from the shackles of injury and self-destruction to muster a precious point against Switzerland to keep their Euro 2024 campaign alive. Qualification hero Scott McTominay's deflected shot almost lifted the roof off the deafening Cologne Stadium on 13 minutes. However, a bewildering blind back pass from Anthony Ralston gift-wrapped an opportunity for Xherdan Shaqiri to sweep home a sublime first-time shot high beyond Angus Gunn. Kieran Tierney pulled up, clutching his hamstring, as Dan Nyoje ran on to squander a golden chance when it threw on goal and will miss the Hungary game on Sunday. But the Scots, already patched up in defence, roused themselves heroically in the closing stages, which saw Grant Hanley strike a post with a header from an Andy Robertson free kick. The Swiss spurned a host of late chances, but not enough to deny Scotland a point to move third in Group A, with victory against the Hungarians surely enough to see them out of a group stage for the first time in their history. At the foot of the gargantuan Kölner Dom, tens of thousands of Scotland supporters steadied themselves to watch their team attempt to scale a challenger of a similar scale. In the 5-1 defeat by host Germany on Friday, the Scots were a shadow of the team which a year ago stunned Norway or beat the Spanish in qualifying. The guile and doggedness deserted them in the vast expanses of the Alliance Arena. In this intense cauldron they rattled a Swiss team which swept away the Hungarians on match day 1. The opener was vintage Scotland from the qualifiers. A McTominay header cleared a corner, with Andy Robertson carrying the ball the full length of the pitch on a cavalry charge. When Callum McGregor eventually laid a heavy pass to the Manchester United midfielder, his first-time shot took a big deflection off Fabian Schär to rocket high into the net. Nervousness at the back was still there on the right side of defence in that first half, and there were more than a few hearts in mouths moments as Switzerland missed a glut of glaring chances as the clock and fingernails ran down. But in the second half, Scotland attacked with fervour and without fear, and they've given themselves a chance. That's all Steve Clarke or the Bumper Scotland crowd, who travelled from the city centre, could have asked for. Switzerland drew so many plaudits from their performance against Hungary, particularly in a thrilling first half. Against Scotland, when they broke in the opening at 45 minutes, they were terrifying, particularly down the Scots' troublesome right side. In Shaqiri, they have a talisman like few others. With his wonder strike, he has now scored in the last 3 World Cups and European Championships. The Swiss, who knew a win would see them through to the last 16, also had the ball in the net twice with narrow offside margins denying them. There was also 2 glaring misses to boot. But in the second half, as the game opened and they threatened on the counter, they too demonstrated a fragility at the back. They'll be looking at this as an opportunity missed, with Germany now looming in their final group game. But 4 points may well still be enough to see them through. Scotland head coach Steve Clarke said it was nice to see them. We didn't turn up in the first game. We're a good team when we play. We always knew that the points we require would come from these 2 games. We've got 1 point now. That means we have a chance going into the last game. I believe if we get those 3 points, we go to the next stage. Scotland captain Andy Robertson said, "More like us, much more like us. Aggressive on the front foot. Couldn't get off to a better start. We make a mistake, but Toby Ralston was unbelievable after that. Second half, he was different class. We had our chances, but so did they. We were a lot more happy with that performance. We've taken it in to the last game, and that's all we can ask." Scotland midfielder Billy Gilmore said, "We gave everything out there. We knew we had to bounce back after the last performance, and it puts us in a good place. We're a good team. We know our strengths. Tonight was more like a Scotland performance. Getting after the ball, passionate, everything was there." In terms of match stats, this is the first Euros game in which Scotland have taken points despite conceding. They had lost their previous 6 when doing so. Scotland remains unbeaten against Switzerland at major tournaments, W1 and D1, avoiding defeat in 6 of their last 7 competitive matches against them at W2, D4 and L1. Indeed, 44% of their Euros points, 4 out of 9, have come against the Swiss. Scott McTominay has scored 9 goals for Scotland under Steve Clarke, with only John McGinn, 18, netting more. His 8 goals since the start of qualifying in March 2023 is more than twice as many as other Scotland players. Switzerland have lost just 1 of their last 12 Euros matches, winning 4 and drawing 7, avoiding defeat in their opening 2 group stage games for the second time after Euros 2016 with 1 win and 1 draw. Xherdan Shaqiri has become the only European player to score in each of the last 6 major tournaments since the 2014 World Cup, and Switzerland named their oldest ever starting team in a Euros game. 30-year-old and 119 days. Only Slovakia have named an older player so far in these finals with 30 years and 229 days. If Labour wins the general election, it will need an effective opposition in Parliament, Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has said. He is the latest senior Conservative to publicly acknowledge his party could be on course for defeat. He urged people not to vote for Reform UK, claiming this would result in fewer centre-right MPs. Earlier, Work and Pension Secretary Mel Stride said opinion polls suggested that Labour was heading towards the largest majority virtually in the history of this country. And last week, Grant Shapps urged voters not to give Labour a supermajority with the party's power unchecked. With the Tories losing support to reform, senior figures have repeatedly warned that backing Nigel Farage's party would split the centre-right vote benefiting Labour. Rishi Sunak insists he is still fighting to win. Privately, many Conservative candidates are fairly open about their belief that victory is implausible and that their party should instead hope to limit the scale of Labour victory. However, it is only in this last week senior Tories have publicly raised this prospect in an apparent change of strategy. In an interview with economics editor Faisal Islam, Mr Hunt was asked if talk of a Labour supermajority on the 4th of July was an implicit acknowledgement that the Tory campaign had gone badly wrong. I think it's very important if Labour win that they have an effective opposition in Parliament. In his own constituency, Mr Hunt has admitted he faces a knife-edge battle with the Liberal Democrats to win the new seat of Godalming and Ash. In the 2019 election for his old seat of South West Surrey, Mr Hunt had a majority of 8,817. I do face a fight here for sure. And what I say to people on the doorsteps is if you vote for Reform, Reform aren't going to win, but the Lib Dems will win. You will have fewer centre-right MPs and fewer MPs who want to control migration, fewer MPs who want to reduce tax, and that isn't what those voters want. The constituency MPs for this area for Godalming and Ash include Reform UK Graham Drage, Liberal Democrats Paul Fellows, Conservative Jeremy Hunt, Green Ruby Tucker, Labour James Walsh, and Women's Equality Party Harriet Williams. The families of victims in 2 Boeing 737 MAX plane crashes have asked for prosecutions and a fine of $24.8 billion for the deadliest corporate crime in US history. The family's lawyer, Paul Castle, said the amount was justified and clearly appropriate given enormous human costs of Boeing's crimes. In a 32-page letter, Mr. Castle said that the US government should prosecute those leading the company when 346 people were killed in 2 crashes in 2018 and 2019. The letter cited the apology by Boeing's chief executive, David Colhorn, on Tuesday while he gave evidence to Congress. I apologise for the grief that we have caused, he said, as he was heckled by family members of victims of the crashes. 2 737 MAX aircraft were lost in separate but almost identical accidents that killed 346 people. In October 2018, all 189 on a Lion Air flight died after the aircraft crashed into the Java Sea 13 minutes after takeoff from Jakarta, Indonesia. In March 2019, an Ethiopian Airlines flight crashed 6 minutes after takeoff from the Ethiopian capital of Addis Ababa. All 157 on board were killed. Both crashes were linked to faulty flight control systems. Mr. Calhoun acknowledged in his congressional appearance that the company had made mistakes and said it had learned from the past. He also acknowledged that Boeing had retaliated against whistleblowers, but said he had listened to those employees. The Justice Department is considering whether to revive a criminal charge of fraud against Boeing laid in 2021. That was linked to the 2 crashes. The charge has laid dormant since the company acknowledged in a settlement that had misled all safety regulators about aspects of the 737 MAX and promised to create a new compliance system to detect and prevent further fraud. Last month, the prosecutors determined that the settlement was violated when a door panel flew off a 737 MAX plane during an Alaska Airlines flight in January, leaving a gaping hole in the fuselage mid-flight. The Justice Department has until the 7th of July to decide whether to revive the case. In the letter, Mr. Cassell said his clients recommended that the department order a portion of any future fine to be used to create an independent monitor of the company's safety and compliance measures. Families of those killed in the crashes attended Tuesday's hearing in Congress and held up photographs of loved ones. I flew from England to Washington, D.C. to hear in person what the Boeing CEO has to say to the Senate and to the world about any safety improvements made at that corporation, said Zipporah Currier, whose father was killed in the 2019 crash of a Boeing 737 MAX 8 jet. I also continue to press the US government to hold Boeing and its corporate executives criminally responsible for the deaths of 346 people. We will not rest until we see justice. A homeless pensioner has spoken about how tough it has been sleeping on a friend's sofa since she retired. Frida Wellington lived in Great Yarmouth, Norfolk, until she has served a no-fault eviction. The 66-year-old said that losing her home had left her feeling like a nervous wreck. Research for the homeless charity Shelter showed that private renters over the age of 55 are hit with a no-fault eviction notice every 16 minutes in England. Miss Wellington, a mother of two, moved into a one-bedroom home in Great Yarmouth 9 years ago after a relationship breakdown. In March 2023, the landlord said he wanted to increase the rent. The retired telephone support worker asked if she could renegotiate the £50 a month increase, but was later sent an eviction notice. I was a good tenant, didn't miss any payments at all. That is what hurt. She was served a no-fault eviction, which allows landlords to repossess their properties, even if there has been no problem with the tenant. She said during that time she felt like a nervous wreck, not knowing where she would live. After staying in a hotel paid for by the council, the pensioner is now sleeping on a friend's sofa. She described her relief at being able to clean her clothes for the first time in 6 weeks, which she said was hard as she is a very clean person. She said she was glad that she had somewhere to stay, but was tossing and turning and awake most of the night on the sofa. It's not a good feeling when you've worked hard all your life to be in this situation. She said she understood that landlords are running a business, but said that they need to be more accommodating to elderly renters. I was looking forward to my retirement and I didn't expect this to happen. The government had promised to abolish no-fault evictions before the general election, but that did not become law before the dissolution of Parliament on the 30th of May. Research for the homeless charity Shelter has shown that 400,000 older renters live in fear of being evicted by their landlord. The charity said that private renters over the age of 55 are hit with a no-fault eviction notice every 16 minutes in England. Polly Neat, the chief executive of Shelter, said instead of being able to finally enjoy retirement, pensioners are living with the constant fear of homelessness hanging over them. With private rents rocketing and no-fault evictions rife, too many older people are being forced into homelessness because there aren't enough social homes available and private renting is just too expensive. The latest government figures show there were 9,700 people over the age of 55 who were assessed as being owed a prevention or relief duty, more commonly known as at risk of homelessness or homelessness. In Great Yarmouth, there are currently 956 households on the waiting list for social housing in the borough, and a further 902 new requests that need to be assessed. Miss Wellington was offered accommodation by Great Yarmouth Borough Council, but turned it down as she said it was not suitable due to health issues. A spokesperson for the council said it has a legal obligation to support those who are homeless, and applicants' medical details are considered to ensure a suitable property offer is made. Royal Mail has launched a set of stamps to mark the 60th anniversary of the Red Arrows. Available from today, the main set of 8 stamps includes images of the RAF jets performing spectacular aerobatic displays, including the trademark red, white and blue trails. 4 additional stamps show them above landmarks such as the Eiffel Tower and Niagara Falls. The Red Arrows were established in 1964 and have completed almost 5,000 displays in 57 countries. Squadron leader John Bond, who flies as Red 1, said the stamps celebrated the heritage of the Red Arrows and featured brilliant images. The stamps would hopefully inspire many more people, he added, just like each of our colourful dynamic displays. The Red Arrows are based at RAF Wellington in Lincolnshire and fly Hawk jets. On Saturday, they flew over central London to mark the King's official birthday. David Gold, Royal Mail's Director of External Affairs and Policy, said the Red Arrows represented the UK globally and had entertained us with spectacular displays of aeronautical excellence. We are proud to mark their 60th season with these striking new stamps. Gentle shockwaves could regenerate the heart tissue of patients after bypass surgery, research suggests. A study of 63 people in Austria found these, given the new treatment, could walk further and their hearts could pump more blood. For the first time, we are seeing the heart muscle regenerate in a clinical setting, which could help millions of people, Professor Johannes Caulfield from Innsbruck Medical University said. Large trials of the device, dubbed as Space Hairdryer by researchers, are now planned to try to replicate the results in a wider group of patients. Every year, 18 million people around the world die from heart disease or other cardiovascular complications, according to the World Health Organization. Risk factors include high blood pressure and an unhealthy diet, as well as tobacco and alcohol use. There is no cure for what is the leading cause of death globally. Drugs and other treatment can help manage the disease and reduce the chances of a heart attack, where the supply of blood to the organ is suddenly blocked. In severe cases, surgeons take a healthy blood vessel from the chest, leg, or arm and attach it to the area of the heart above and below the blocked artery, a procedure known as a heart bypass. But this kind of operation can only preserve heart function rather than improve it. Researchers in Austria have been trying to regenerate the damaged tissue itself by applying mild sound waves shortly after bypass surgery. The procedure, which takes about 10 minutes, is designed to stimulate the growth of new vessels around the area damaged or scarred after a heart attack. A similar shockwave technique is already used to treat other conditions, such as injured tendons and ligaments and erectile dysfunction. Higher strength waves or pulses are also known in lithotripsy, a common medical procedure to break up kidney stones. Half of the bypass patients in the study, published in the European Heart Journal, were treated with sound waves under general anesthetic, while the others received a fake or sham procedure. A year after their surgery, the amount of oxygenated blood pumped by the heart has increased by 11.3% in the shockwave group and 6.3% in the control group. The shockwave patients could also walk further without resting and reported a higher quality of life. It means they're able to go out for a walk with their dog again or go to the supermarket in their everyday life. We also anticipate they will have a longer life expectancy and fewer rehospitalizations. British Heart Foundation Associate Medical Director Dr. Sonia Babu Narayan, a consultant cardiologist, said current heart disease treatment left much room for improvement. What's exciting about this trial is that a year later, people who had shockwave therapy to the heart during their operation had better heart function and better symptoms than those who didn't. Bigger and longer trials are now needed to research the long-term effects. The researchers expect European regulators to approve the device later this year, with the first use on patients outside clinical trials planned for 2025. The study was funded by Austrian government departments, the US National Heart, Lung and Blood Institute, and a company spun off from Innsbruck Medical University and part-owned by the researchers. The Supreme Court has ruled that Surrey County Council should have considered the climate impacts of burning oil drilled from new wells in Hawley. Under planning law, the assumption has always been that only the impacts from constructing the wells and not the use of the final oil products should be considered. The case brought by Sarah Finch on behalf of campaigners could threaten new UK fossil fuel projects. The council said it followed planning laws. Today's judgment relates to the Horse Hill oil well in Surrey. The site was given planning permission to expand its operations in 2019, a decision that was challenged by a local resident, Sarah Finch, on behalf of Wheeled Action Group. Lawyers acting for Miss Finch said that as part of the environmental impact assessment, the council should have considered not just the greenhouse gas emissions from building the wells, but also burning any oil that was then known as downstream emissions. The 6 wells at Horse Hill are expected to produce 3.3 million tonnes of crude oil over the next 20 years. Burning that oil would produce over 10 million tonnes of CO2, the environmental campaigning organisation Friends of the Earth has estimated. The judgment by a 3-2 majority is likely to have a significant impact on decisions on future fossil fuel projects in the UK. Campaigners claim the judgment could also affect ongoing legal challenges of new projects in the UK, including Rosebank oil field and the proposed coal mine in Whitehaven in Cumbria too. Because the UK law on environmental assessments is based in part on European law, the ruling could have impacts abroad as well. There must be a fierce zero tolerance for sexual harassment and abuse in Westminster, former MP Harriet Harman has said. In an interview, she said women working in Parliament were being exploited and abused, and the general election was an opportunity for a new generation of MPs to make a cultural change. She has also called on more men to speak out if they witness abuse. Her comments come after damning allegations have been made about the behaviour of some MPs in recent months, with several suspended. A House of Commons spokesperson said sexual misconduct, harassment and bullying have absolutely no place in Parliament. Ms Harman, who is the UK's longest continuously serving female MP, added that everyone was entitled to just be able to do their work and not to be prey to predatory behaviour, especially sexual predatory behaviour. She was adamant power dynamics in Westminster were making younger women feel vulnerable. There's no doubt about it that there are men who are higher up in the system who believe they can get away with it because the woman's in a junior position, and they are counting on the fact that they've got impunity because she will not dare speak out. One former parliamentary aide said she was recently told by a man who is more senior to her that her breasts look very perky in that top. In response to that, Ms Harman said, "That is totally unacceptable in any workplace. I want to see in the next parliament a real expression of male allyship, of men speaking out against men on their own side. Because if a man is in a bar in the House of Commons and he's groping a woman, and he's also drinking with a number of other men, if they see him, I want the man to speak out and report it, not just leave it to the woman." She also called for a women's caucus made up of female MPs from across the House to support alleged victims when they make complaints. We need them to formally come together so when a woman speaks out about a senior man in her own party, she is not left vulnerable but backed up. The Independent Complaints and Grievance Scheme, ICGS, investigates complaints about inappropriate behaviour in Westminster. It looks into allegations of bullying, harassment or sexual misconduct and provides advice to complainants. It was created in 2018 to give victims somewhere to take their complaints. In its last annual report, the ICGS said that there had been 31 investigations over the previous year, with 7 cases upheld. Ms Harman said those will probably be just the tip of the iceberg. The 74-year-old stepped down in May after more than 40 years as an MP. She was often referred to as the mother of the House after serving for more than 40 years. Throughout her time in Parliament, Ms Harman actively campaigned for women's issues and is planning to continue to do so outside the political world. We take any complaint of unacceptable behaviour extremely seriously and remain committed to ensuring that lasting cultural change can be achieved here, a House of Commons spokesperson said. There are a range of support services now available in Parliament, established as part of changes made in recent years, aimed at creating an environment where everyone can work without fear of sexual harassment or bullying and delivering a workplace where everyone feels safe and valued. NatWest is to buy the main banking business of Sainsbury's as the supermarket chain withdraws from the sector in order to focus on food. Under the deal, NatWest will take on the credit cards, loans and savings accounts of Sainsbury's Bank. However, it is not buying the Sainsbury's Bank brand or its cash machines, insurance or travel money businesses. Customers will see no immediate change as a result of the deal, Sainsbury's said, and do not need to take any action. Sainsbury's said it would seek to redeploy employees at risk of losing their jobs as part of a consultation process. Although NatWest is not automatically taking on those Sainsbury's employees as part of the deal, a spokeswoman for the supermarket said both parties are committed to exploring opportunities for ongoing employment with NatWest. She declined to say how many employees would be affected. NatWest said it would gain about 1 million customer accounts as part of the deal, which is expected to complete at the end of March next year. The bank will take on £1.4 billion of unsecured personal loans and £1.1 billion of credit card balances, as well as £2.6 billion of customer deposits. Sainsbury's Bank will pay out £125 million to NatWest and £250 million to Sainsbury's as part of the agreement. As Sainsbury's Bank started as a joint venture with the Bank of Scotland in 1997, before Sainsbury's took full ownership in 2014. But the supermarket said in January that it planned to wind down its banking division in order to focus on its core food business. Sainsbury's is not the only supermarket to have pulled out of the banking sector. In February, Tesco sold its retail banking operations to Barclays in a deal worth £600 million. Barclays bought Tesco Bank's credit cards, loans and saving accounts, and also agreed to market Tesco-branded banking services. An Old Bailey jury has been discharged in the case of Constance Martin and Mark Gordon after being unable to reach verdicts. Miss Martin, 37, and Mr. Gordon, 50, denied manslaughter by gross negligence of their newborn baby Victoria, whose body was found inside a shopping bag in a shed in Brighton on the 1st of March 2023. The jury heard pathologists had been unable to establish how Victoria had died because her body was so badly decomposed. The prosecution will now have to consider whether to seek a retrial. The trial began almost 5 months ago, on the 25th of January, and the jury of 5 women and 5 men spent 72 hours and 33 minutes deliberating. On Wednesday, the judge Mark Lucrat, KC, thanked jurors for their extraordinary public service and the dedication they have shown in the case. Judges said he was conscious the jurors had put their lives on hold for the trial and excused them from jury service for the rest of their lives. A judge can decide to discharge a jury, essentially dismiss them at the end of the trial if they've been unable to reach a majority verdict. Any retrial then requires that a new jury be appointed. A high-risk missing persons manhunt has been launched for the couple and their baby on the 5th of January 2023. After a car they had been travelling in was discovered on fire on the M61 near Bolton. The couple were eventually found in Brighton in the 27th of February 2023, 2 days before Victoria's body was discovered. As well as denying the charge of manslaughter by gross negligence, the couple denied 4 other charges: concealment of the baby's birth, child cruelty, causing or allowing her death, and perverting the course of justice by concealing the body. A crucial medical exam in India has sparked anger, protests, and allegations of cheating after thousands of candidates secured unusually high marks in this year's test. The National Eligibility Entrance Test Undergraduate, or NEET UG, is the gateway to studying medicine in the country, as its score is necessary for getting admission to a medical college. It is conducted by the National Testing Agency, NTA, a government organisation which holds some of India's biggest exams. Millions of students take the exam every year, but only a small percentage get good enough marks to secure a college placement. But this year the challenge is somewhat different. Too many candidates have got top marks, pushing down the ranking system and making it hard for even higher scorers to get admission. Since the results were declared on the 4th of June, the exam has come under scrutiny for reasons ranging from errors in the question paper and gross compensatory marks being given in a faulty manner to allegations of paper leaks and fraud. Students and parents have demanded a retest, and dozens of petitions have been filed in courts to this end. NTA officials have denied allegations of paper leaks, but on Sunday, Federal Educational Minister Dharmendra Pradhan admitted that some irregularities had come to light in certain exam centres. He said that no one, including NTA officials, would be spared if irregularities were found. On Tuesday, India's top court issued a notice to the NTA, saying that even if there was a 0.001% negligence on the part of anyone, it should be thoroughly dealt with. But all this is small consolation for students who spend months or even years preparing for this highly competitive exam. Tens of millions of students in India dream of getting into a good medical or engineering college every year. The professions command a lot of respect and also hold out hope for a steady long-term income in a country with a job crisis. This year, an astounding 2.4 million students completed for just 110,000 available seats in the NEET exam, underscoring the intense pressure and fierce competition faced by aspiring candidates. Of the total seats, 55,000 to 60,000 seats belong to government-run colleges, while private colleges offer the rest. Half of the seats are reserved for underprivileged students. Students flock to government colleges for their affordability. A 5-year MBBS course in a government college costs between 500,000 and 1 million rupees, between $5,992 and $11,984, whereas private colleges can charge up to 10 times more. When results were announced on 4th of June, it turned out that an unprecedented 67 students had achieved the perfect score of 720 marks. Since 2016, when NEET became the official entrance exam for medical colleges in India, only 1 to 3 students have got full marks each year, and sometimes not even that. This year, there was also a significant increase in the number of candidates scoring in the high range of 650 to 680 marks, intensifying the competition for seats in India's top medical colleges. The unusual results sparked concerns among parents and students who alleged irregularities in the exam's conduct and grading and called for an investigation. But the NTA refuted these allegations, saying that the integrity of the examination had not been compromised and that there were more high scorers this year because more students had taken the exam. It also said that 1,563 candidates were given grace marks for delays at exam centres and because a physics question turned out to have 2 correct answers. Notably, 50 out of the 67 top scorers achieved perfect marks due to these compensatory points. But on the 13th of June, India's top court cancelled the compensatory marks after several students filed petitions challenging the NTA's decision, calling it arbitrary and unfair. The Supreme Court also asked for students who had received grace marks to be given the option to take the test again. This is set to be held on the 23rd of June. But protesters say the court's ruling doesn't address the larger issues they raised, like allegations of paper leaks, cheating, and systemic corruption. Surba Sharma, 23, who attempted the exam for the 5th time this year and scored 650 marks, alleges that paper leaks rampant in India are behind the fluctuations in scores. She noted that despite a significant increase in higher scorers in the 650 to 680 mark range, there was no similar rise in mid-range scorers 610 to 640 marks. NTA officials have said that more candidates got higher scores because the paper was easier this year, but if that was the case, everyone should have done better and not just a section of the candidates. Dr. Vivek Pandey, an activist assisting candidates with related court petitions, supports her stance. On the 1st of June, he helped file a Supreme Court petition where 10 students requested that they be allowed to retake NEET, alleging that the question paper was leaked at exam centres in Patna, the capital of Bihar state. The Bihar police launched an investigation into the allegations shortly after the exam was conducted. On the 10th of May, they announced the arrest of 13 people, including 4 students, in connection with a paper leak case. On the 15th of June, the police sent notices to 9 more students suspected of being involved in the case and asked them to join the investigation. Manavjit Singh Dhillon, a senior police official, said the Times of India newspaper that the 13 accused had allegedly leaked the question paper to 30 candidates in a safe house a day before the exam in exchange for hundreds of thousands of rupees. He said to the PTI news agency separately that during the course of the investigation, officials had recovered post-dated checks and partially burnt papers, and that they had sought question papers from the NTA for reference. Besides accusations of paper leaks, the exam has faced additional allegations of cheating and fraud. Police have arrested 3 people in Delhi and 6 in Rajasthan for allegedly impersonating NEET candidates to write the exam on their behalf. In Gujarat State, police arrested 5 people for their alleged involvement in a cheating plot at an exam centre in Godhra. The controversy has drawn criticism from opposition leaders who accused the Bharat Janata Party BJP-led coalition government of betraying the dreams of millions of students. Congress leader Mallikarjun Kharge questioned Prime Minister Narendra Modi's silence on the issue and accused his government of covering up to the NEET scam. The party has also demanded a Supreme Court-led investigation into the alleged irregularities. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court is set to hear a clutch of petitions related to the NEET exam results, including ones asking for the test to be scrapped on the 8th of July. Sue Taylor-Franklin is striving once again to be one of the strongest women in the world. At her peak, the 56-year-old could deadlift almost a quarter of a ton and even broke a world record by pulling a 48-ton aeroplane with her wife Sam. But the powerlifter from Aberdare, Rhonda Sinan-Taff, found her career in jeopardy when a knee injury she sustained in a motorbike accident as the 17-year-old flared up at the end of 2021, and she was told there was a 5-year waiting list on the NHS. After turning it to online crowdfunding, she was able to afford a £10,000 operation in Lithuania, but her experience means she believes the UK's health services need an overhaul because she couldn't get the help when I needed it. Sue's knee would swell most days and she was unable to walk very far. As the bones were so worn down, I knew I needed an operation. She said, "We've got a 13-year-old son and a puppy, but I couldn't do anything because the pain was through the roof. On a scale between 1 and 10, it was 15. After having a private scan, she was told at the start of 2023 that she would not get surgery before 2028. With her mental health suffering and an increasing dependency on strong painkillers, Sue found a clinic in Lithuania offering the treatment for £10,000, but she couldn't afford it. We looked at options of getting loans, getting credit cards and maxing them out, but we'd only recently had a mortgage on our house. So Sam turned to her crowdfunding website in March 2023, and in part due to support from the powerlifting community, their target was reached in just 5 weeks, and she had surgery that September. I was really humbled. I mean, the money came from all over the world, America, Norway, Japan, as well as Britain. Experiences like Sue's are not uncommon in Wales, with about 1 in 5 people on an NHS waiting list for planned treatments and on average waiting 58% longer than in England. The differences between the longest waits is even starker. There are just under 21,300 cases in Wales of someone waiting more and more than 2 years, compared to just 275 in England. This figure has risen in the latest month. These figures have been seized upon by the Conservatives, Plaid Cymru, Lib Dems, Reform and others to attack Labour's record on health in the nation where it has been running the NHS for 25 years. But are the criticisms fair? Given that 2-year waits have been reduced to a very low level in England, not so much in Scotland, it does seem you would be much more likely to wait that period in Wales, said Mark Dayan of the UK health think tank, the Nuffield Trust. But to some extent that flatters England a bit, because England hasn't necessarily made quite so much progress in reducing waiting times across the board. The policy analyst said waiting lists were not the only things that matter. He added, "I'm not sure that there are clear indications that the actual clinical quality of care in Wales is any different or worse or better, and that really is the ultimate standard by which you judge health systems." Independent experts also point out that simple comparisons don't take into account that Wales' population is, on the whole, older, poorer and sicker than across the border, meaning an extra burden on the NHS. Nor do they consider differing policy choices, such as prioritising patients based on clinical need. Lengthy waiting lists in Wales not only predate the COVID pandemic, but also devolution itself, so it's long-standing problems. The Welsh Labour government also suggested that measures such as 4-hour waits in big A&E departments, its performance has been better than England for 15 of the past 20 months. It also highlighted that 15% more is spent in Wales per head on health and social care than in England. Health is devolved, so whoever wins this election won't be in charge of the Welsh NHS, but decisions made in Westminster about how much to spend on England's public services likely determine how much money it comes to Wales, and as a result could influence future Welsh health policy. In this election, each party claims it knows how to make the NHS fitter for the future, but the Nuffield Trust suggested that most parties were underestimating the scale of the financial challenges. We have not learned a lot about health spending in this election. All the parties have been really trying to pledge as little additional money as they can, while making some quite big promises about what they'll achieve, said Mr. Dayan. Back from Lithuania and back in the gym, although not ready to lift the very heaviest weights just yet, she's making solid progress, but worries the NHS is heading in the opposite direction. She said, "I've worked 41 years of my life, always paid my tax, but I couldn't get the help when I needed it. I think they need to shut the NHS down and start all over again. I don't see any way that it can come back from where it is. It needs a complete overhaul. I think it's in such dire strait that whichever party gets in isn't going to be able to fix it. I don't think it's fixable. Thanks to the generosity of others, Sue has been able to fix her knee and is eager to break more powerlifting records. But she is worried the NHS, not just in Wales but across the UK, is broken beyond repair." John Swinney has said that the Scottish Government will be empowered to begin negotiations for a second independence referendum if the SNP wins a majority of Scottish seats at the general election. Launching the SNP's manifesto on Wednesday, the party leader said the election gave voters a chance to intensify the pressure to ensure Scottish independence. Mr. Swinney also introduced plans for a legal guarantee to keep the NHS in public hands and an extra £1.6 billion for the NHS each year to Scotland. The manifesto also called for the 2-child benefit cap and the House of Lords to be scrapped. Speaking at the manifesto launch in Edinburgh, Mr. Swinney, who is also Scotland's First Minister, said if the SNP wins a majority of seats in this election in Scotland, the Scottish Government will embark on negotiations with the UK Government to run the democratic wishes of people in Scotland into a reality. The best way to secure independence is through a democratic referendum. The obstacle to that is the intransigence of the United Kingdom Government. So what this election gives people the chance to do is to intensify the pressure to secure Scottish independence and to bring that about by voting SNP in order for us to achieve a majority of Westminster seats at this election. And independent Scotland would rejoin the EU, Mr. Swinney said, adding that independence would help build a fair and prosperous economy, but success is not guaranteed. The party manifesto sets out 4 demands to protect the NHS in Scotland, which is devolved, with the Scottish Government having responsibility for it rather than Westminster. The SNP said it would urge the UK Government to reinvest at least another £6 billion in the NHS to match Scotland's most recent pay deals for healthcare staff. The manifesto said that the extra investment would deliver about £600 million for the Scottish Government through the Barnett formula, which he said would then be spent on NHS staff members' pay and conditions. The SNP also wants the UK Government to boost NHS spending by a minimum of £10 billion extra each year to address rampant inflationary pressures and improve performance. Mr. Swinney said taking together these 2 policies would achieve a total additional investment of £1.6 billion for the health service in Scotland. He said SNP MPs would introduce a bill in Westminster aimed at creating a legal guarantee to keep the NHS operating as a publicly owned, publicly operated service. The SNP message on the health service is clear. It is simple and it will never change. The NHS is not for sale. NHS Scotland spent £116 million on external providers 0.7% of what it calls the frontline health budget in 2022 to 2023, compared to a bill of £11.5 billion for the UK Department of Health, 6.5% according to the Scottish Government. But currently Scotland has a much higher proportion of patients facing very long waits for planned NHS treatment than England, with around 8,000 waits over 2 years for hospital procedures or specialist appointments. Healthcare is a devolved issue in Scotland, meaning the Scottish Government runs its own NHS. However, the overall budget is affected by spending by the UK Government, and the SNP has previously blamed this for limitations in the Scottish NHS. The party also wants a reversal on a Conservative policy which stops care workers from overseas bringing their families with them to work in the UK. Speaking at a manifesto launch in Edinburgh, Mr Swinney also attempted to position the SNP as the only party committed to ending spending cuts. The SNP wants taxation, including national insurance rates and windfall taxes, to be made a devolved power. Income tax rates and bans, stamp duty and air passenger duty are already controlled by the Scottish Government. The party said it would crack down on tax avoidance, and the manifesto states that companies making excessive profits shoulder the burden that families face. The First Minister reaffirmed his party's pledge to eradicate child poverty in Scotland, an issue he said is being made much worse by the two-child benefit cap. The two-child cap, which was introduced by the UK Government in 2017, restricts child tax credit and universal credit to the first two children in most households. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has previously said that he would ideally want to scrap the cap, but that we haven't got the resources to do it at the moment. Mr Swinney said that the future of the two-child cap is a simple test. Are you in government to help children out of poverty, or are you so morally lost that you push children into poverty? The SNP is also calling for the scrapping of the Trident nuclear weapons system, with the money instead being invested in conventional defence systems and public services. The manifesto is also calling for the UK Government to match a £500 million scheme set up by the Scottish Government, helping the transition away from oil and gas industries in the north of Scotland. Other policies included in the SNP manifesto include scrapping zero-hour contracts, banning fire and rehire practices, and repealing the minimum service bill, increasing maternity pay by bringing the UK into line with other European countries and promoting shared parental leave, maintaining the triple lock pension, a move to deliver a well-being pension, as well as opposing any further increases in the state pension age, demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and calling on the UK Government to recognise an independent Palestinian state. There are calls for a school to be investigated after promoting creationism and an evangelistic Christian course. The National Secular Society, NSS, said it had obtained images of wall displays at Llandudno's High School in Powys, showing marine life and the solar system beneath lines from the Bible such as "Great are the works of the Lord" and "God created the creatures of the sea." The NSS is calling for a ban on teaching creationism in schools in Wales, saying it undermines teaching about evidence-based theories such as evolution. The Welsh Government said community schools are not permitted to have a religious leaning. While teaching creationism as a scientific theory is banned in England, the promotion of creationism is not prohibited in schools in Wales. The NSS claims the promotion of creationism at the school is being led by head teacher Daniel Owen, who is also an elder of spiritual leader at an evangelical church in Newtown, about 14 miles from Llandudno's. The church's website says Mr Owen has oversight of the church's work amongst children and young people, and that the church also has a very special duty to preach the gospel to every living person. The NSS says it has been told the wall displays at the school are large enough to cover entire walls, and that they were allegedly paid for from school funds. In a picture shown to BBC Wales by the NSS, one of the wall displays shows a map of the world under a quotation from the Apostle Paul, which says, "From one man God made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth," and he marked out their appointment times in history and the boundaries of their lands. The Secular Society also claims that schools' planners provided to pupils have an advice page which only refers to verses from the Bible. The image, which the NSS claims is of a page from the school planner, has sections on suicide, sex and abuse, which point towards verses that advise people to flee from sexual immorality, flee the evil desires of youth, and people who look at women lustfully had already committed adultery in their heart. The advice page does not direct the pupils to helplines or other professional sources of support for abuse or suicide. The NSS also claims that Mr Owen is alleged to have told teachers to show a video advertising the Alpha course, a Christian evangelistic course, to their tutor groups, and that pupils could follow the course at lunchtime called Lighthouse. The NSS has written to the Welsh Government requesting that new guidance be issued prohibiting the promotion or teaching of creationism as an alternative scientific theory. It also called for an investigation into the situation at Llandudno's High School. Stephen Evans, Chief Executive of the National Secular Society, said the extensive campaign of evangelism at Llandudno's High School is a gross violation of the trust which should exist between pupils, parents and staff. Significant school time and resources have been expended on efforts to inculcate the religious ideology of the teacher. A Welsh Government spokesperson said schools are required to teach science, including evolution, at an early age to help lay the foundations for a better understanding of wider scientific concepts and formation of the universe. Religion, Values and Ethics (RVE) curriculum requires learners to be engaged with a range of views and beliefs commonly held in society. Community schools are not permitted to have a religious leaning, and we are in discussions with the local authority. The spokesperson for Powys Council said it is essential that head teachers, senior leaders and governors understand the legal requirements of RVE within the curriculum for Wales. As a council, we are currently in discussion with the head teacher, chair of governors and Welsh Government on this matter. We are also engaging with the Standing Advisory Council on Religious Education, a statutory requirement for all local authorities to seek advice under its statutory duties. The role of religion in schools has always been controversial. There are over 200 faith schools in Wales which have a religious charter or have formal links with a faith-based organisation, and they have often had flexibility with their admissions policy and appointing staff, but the community schools aren't allowed to have a religious leaning. Under the curriculum for Wales, religion, values and ethics is mandatory in all maintained schools, and guidance says it should be objective, critical and pluralistic, and not about making learners religious or non-religious. Campaigners say creationism should be explicitly banned. Concerns have been raised in the past about the beliefs of groups invited into schools, or even the ethos of some places pupils visit on school trips. It is a sensitive area where schools usually tread carefully, but in this case the Welsh Government and local authority are looking into whether laws have been breached. Chinese car companies have called on Beijing to hit European Union rivals with import taxes of up to 25% if the trading bloc imposes tariffs on vehicles from China, the country's state media has reported. The demand was purportedly made at a closed-door meeting organised by China's Ministry of Commerce, which was also attended by representatives of European car firms. The measures would target cars from the EU with large petrol-driven engines. Last week, the EU threatened Chinese electric vehicle EV makers with tariffs of up to 38% from the 4th of July. The meeting in Beijing was attended by 4 Chinese and 6 European car companies, according to an article published by a social media account affiliated with state broadcaster CCTV. German car maker giant Volkswagen has confirmed that it was present at the meeting, but declined to comment on what was discussed. Other European companies that were reportedly present, including BMW and Porsche, did not respond for comment. China's car companies called on the government to adopt firm countermeasures against the EU. It is suggesting that within the limits allowed by World Trade Organization rules, a higher provisional tariff be imposed on large displacement petrol vehicles imported from Europe. The reports echo an article published last month by the state-run newspaper Global Times, which said that 25% tariffs should apply to cars with petrol engines larger than 2.5 litres. The move would target luxury or ultra-luxury vehicles, meaning an additional tax is not likely to make much of a difference on volumes, Bill Rosso from advisory firm Automobility said. The EU's governing European Commission, EC, announced last week that it had provisionally concluded that Chinese EV manufacturers will face tariffs should discussions with Chinese authorities not lead to an effective solution. Firms that cooperated with the investigation, which was launched in October, will face an average 21% duty, while those who did not face one of 38.1%. These charges would come on top of the current rate of 10% tariff levied on all electric cars produced in China. The EU's intervention comes after the US made the much bolder move of raising its tariff on Chinese electric cars from 25% to 100% last month. The Chinese government has denounced the decisions as protectionism and has since started taking retaliatory measures. Earlier this week, China launched an investigation into imports of European pork products. Last month, Beijing signalled a similar move by launching an investigation into imports of chemicals from the EU and US. Interest rates are expected to be held at 5.25% for the 7th time in a row by the Bank of England on Thursday. Despite inflation hitting the central bank's target for the first time in 3 years, most economists have predicted rates, currently at a 16-year high, will not be cut. They believe the bank will want to wait and see if inflation stays at 2% in the coming months, with the first rate cut in the autumn now looking more likely than the summer. The bank's decision comes in after the general election, with policies for the future of the UK economy a key battleground for political parties. After data revealed inflation fell to 2% in the year to May, the Conservatives said it proved their difficult decisions were paying off. However, Labour responded saying pressures on family finances were still acute. The Bank of England is independent of the government and its main role is to keep inflation, which measures the rate consumer prices rise, stable at 2%. In response to high inflation, the bank in recent years has raised and then kept interest rates at a high level in an attempt to slow it down and ease the cost of living. Laura Souter, AJ Bell's personal finance director, said it would be very unlikely that the bank would cut rates during an election campaign. It's highly likely the bank will want to wait and see the outcome of the election and the final economic plans before making that first cut, she added. With no meeting in July, that means all eyes are now firmly on the August meeting for our first potential cut to rates. Analysts also said rates are unlikely to be cut because of services inflation, which reflects prices for cinema tickets, restaurant meals and holidays remaining higher than expected. Higher interest rates has meant the cost of borrowing money has increased for things such as mortgages, credit cards and loans. However, returns on savings have risen. The theory behind rising rates is that it will slow inflation, but it can also drag on economic growth as business may be put off investment or hiring, which could mean less jobs being created. Last month, the Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, said policymakers needed to see more evidence that price rises have slowed further before cutting interest rates, but that he was optimistic. Paul Broadhead, the Building Society Association's BSA head of mortgage and housing policy, said rates being left unchanged would come as a disappointment to mortgage holders and would-be borrowers. A cut would have provided a little much-needed optimism to homeowners and first-time buyers. According to data from the BSA released on Thursday, more than half of people surveyed think the deposit required to buy a home is too high. For first-time buyers, the figure is 2/3. The average first-time buyer needs a household income of more than £60,000 to get onto the property ladder, according to data from Zoopla on Thursday. Both the Labour Party and the Conservatives have each accused the other of failing to match promises on housing, which in turn would raise costs for home buyers or renters. The Conservatives said they were offering a better deal on stamp duty by permanently abolishing the levy for first-time buyers purchasing properties up to £425,000. However, analysts say stamp duty is primarily paid by those buying larger homes or in more expensive areas. Potential savings would not benefit everyone, as some would not need to pay anyway. Meanwhile, Labour said its more ambitious plans for energy efficiency in rental homes would protect tenants from higher energy bills. Questions remain on whether their proposals would be achievable, following concerns raised by charities over the quality of installation fittings under government schemes. Interest first started being hiked from near zero in 2021, as prices started to rise quickly after COVID lockdowns ended as demand for goods and services soared. Energy prices then rocketed following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which drove inflation to a 40-year high of 11.1% in October 2022. Kendrick Lamar hosted a star-studded concert in Los Angeles' Kaya Forum on Wednesday intended as a show of unity for the West Coast rap fraternity. More than 20 musicians made guest appearances, including Dr. Dre, Roddy Ricch, Tiny Dolla $ign, Tyler, the Creator, and Steve Lacy. But the highlight of the night was the live debut of Lamar's song Not Like Us, an ever-accelerating takedown of Canadian star Drake, which brought their long-running feud to a decisive end last month. Encouraged by the crowd, Lamar played the song 5 times, with each performance more explosive than the last. "Y'all ain't gonna let nobody disrespect the West Coast, huh?" he asked as the set drew to a close. "Oh, y'all ain't gonna let nobody mock or imitate our legends, huh?" he added, referring to Drake's decision to use AI versions of Tupac and Snoop Dogg's vocals on his song, Tailor-Made Freestyle. Lamar's feud with Drake goes back years, but it escalated to new levels in April and May as the two rappers traded insults in a flurry of new songs. Drake, who has become the face of mainstream pop rap, accused Lamar of selling out and mocked his height, while also levelling at more serious allegations of domestic violence. The star has never faced such a claim. Lamar, one of the most critically acclaimed lyricists of his generation, called Drake's music predictable and suggested he was addicted to drugs, but Not Like Us took things a step further. In the song, Lamar accused Drake of colonializing Southern rap culture for personal gain and made unsubstantiated claims about his conduct with young women, which Drake later denied. Powered by an irresistible DJ Mustard beat, Not Like Us broke Spotify records, becoming the hip-hop song with the most plays in a single day. It went on to top the US charts and reached numbers 6 in the UK, making it Lamar's biggest hit as a solo artist. The star announced his Jump Teeth concert just 2 weeks ago, but it sold out instantly. Titled the pop-out Ken and Friends, it opened with sets by DJ Head and DJ Mustard, who held a moment in memory of LA Nipsey Hussle, who was murdered 2 years ago. Lamar took to the stage shortly before 6:30 p.m, opening with another Drake diss track called Euphoria. The song includes a new line in which Lamar rapped, "Give me Tupac's ring back, and I might give you a little respect." The lyric referred to a ring previously owned by the late Tupac Shakur that was purchased at auction by an anonymous bidder for over $1 million last year. The buyer was later revealed to be Drake. Lamar went on to play hits including DNA, All Right, Swimming Pools, and King Kunta. He was joined during the set by Schoolboy Q, Ab-Soul, and J-Rock, with whom he formed the hip-hop supergroup Black Hippie to perform Mad City and That Part. Lamar also performed his verse from the Future and Metro Boomin song, Like That, which ignited this year's War of Words. Towards the end of the show, which was streamed live on Amazon, Lamar brought out West Coast rap legend Dr. Dre, acting as hype man on raucous versions of Still Dre and California Love. Dre then teed up the first performance of Not Like Us by whispering at the opening line, "I see dead people." Excitement for the song had been building throughout the night, with the crowd chanting its lyrics at various points in Lamar's set. With each repeat, Lamar was joined by more and more guests. By the end of the night, there were almost 30 people on stage, including YG Steve Lacy, Schoolboy Q, Big Boy, G, Perico, DJ Mustard, and basketball stars Russell Westbrook and DeMar DeRozan. The gathering marked a rare moment of solidarity from Los Angeles' open fractured hip-hop scene. Pausing to take a group photo, Lamar told the crowd, "This is unity, y'all just don't know, man." He dedicated the show to the musicians and friends they had lost to violence, saying everybody on the stage got fallen soldiers. "For all of us to be together, that is special," he continued. "We put this together with peace. I promise this won't be the last of us." The show ended with a 6th instrumental version of Not Like Us, played as fans left the arena. Universities across Yorkshire has warned that planned cuts to the number of international students coming to the UK could push more institutions into debt. Analysis found the 10 major universities in the region made a combined financial loss of nearly £160 million in the past 3 years. Both Conservatives and Labour have promised to reduce the overall levels of net immigration into the UK if they win next month's general election. Professor Karen Bryan, chair of the Regional Partnership Yorkshire Universities, said a 20% drop in overseas students across the country would lead to more universities ending up in deficit. According to the analysis of published financial accounts, 4 of the 10 major universities in Yorkshire ran at a loss in the years 2022 to 2023, which forced some to cut staff numbers and reduce the number of courses offered. They were York St John University, Leeds Beckett University, Sheffield Hallam University, and the University of Huddersfield. Professor Byron said the measures taken already by the government to restrict dependence and to increase visa costs have led to a lower number of applications from foreign students. Our March cohort was around 11% down. She added, Yorkshire is the second most attractive place in the UK after London for international students, so potentially there is a bigger hit for universities in this region. We want to contribute to local and national economic prosperity, and if the government, any government, wants us to do so, that they will need to start to address some of the funding gaps that exist in the sector. Figures from the Higher Education Statistics Agency show that 50,000 international students were studying in Yorkshire and Lincolnshire in 2022 to 2023, up from 32,000 in 2014 to 2015. Fees for British students have been frozen at £9,000 a year since 2012, but some international students can pay in excess of £30,000 a year for their tuition. Sheffield Hallam University has lost more than £60 million in the past 7 years, and in May announced that up to 400 jobs could be lost in the latest round of savings. Dan Grace, a librarian working at Sheffield Hallam, said, "Everyone's concerned about their job at the moment. I don't think anyone feels like they're safe. In the library, we've seen our budgets cut, which means we can't provide resources for the students that are essential for them to be able to complete their degrees." A spokesperson for the university said the government's actions to curb international student recruitment, despite the many economic and cultural benefits they bring, is making the financial picture much worse. Our projections for 2024 to 2025 show international student numbers are likely to be significantly down on previous years, which would see our income fall by nearly £20 million. In May, the Conservative government barred foreign postgraduate students on non-research courses from being able to bring family members with them to the UK, in a move the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said would reduce the number of migrants arriving into the country. Taha Khan is an international student who came to study in Huddersfield in 2020 from Pakistan. He is now president of the university's student union. Foreign students are attracted to the UK because of the history of universities and their prestige. It's also a place where we are free to learn and free to speak. The UK's graduate visa currently allows overseas students to spend 2 years working in the UK after completing their course. Mr. Khan added, "Many international students are continuously stressed about potential changes to visas and the possibility we might not be able to pursue a career in this country. I've invested my money and time, and I want to give something back to the UK because it has made me the person I am today." Going forward, Labour said it would act to create a secure future for higher education, while also reducing the overall level of net migration. In their manifesto, the Conservatives said they would end the ability of all international students entering the UK to bring dependents, while Reform UK said only international students with essential skills could remain in the UK when their study ends. The Liberal Democrats would review the financing of higher education and reinstate maintenance grants for disadvantaged students, while the Green Party pledged it would allow international students to bring family members with them to the UK and promised to abolish undergraduate tuition fees. Parents of children with special educational needs, SEN, say fighting to get their children a school place has been a living hell. Katie Halliday, 41, from Bourne, Lincolnshire, said she was becoming increasingly concerned about her 10-year-old daughter's mental health while she remained in a mainstream school. Dr. Samia Hayat, aged 33, of North Ferriby, East Yorkshire, said her 8-year-old son, who has autism and a developmental delay, had only just been given a place after waiting for one since March. East Riding of Yorkshire Council said it was working hard to create places, while Lincolnshire County Council said it had seen a significant rise in the number requiring support. In January last year, it was found that there were 1.6 million school pupils with identified SEN in England. The latest figures from the Department for Education show 517,000 children and young people had an Educational Health and Care Plan, EHCP, in 2023, the highest on record. Ms. Halliday said her daughter, who has triple X syndrome, sensory processing disorder, and learning delays, could not function in her current classroom. Her daughter often did one-on-one learning in the corridor, the kitchen, or sensory areas of the school. She has huge amounts of anxiety being in school. There was about 2 weeks in school where they couldn't get her to do any work, to the point where she was completely shutting down. She shut herself in the bathroom, hid under a table, not physically able to do anything. When distressed and anxious, her daughter could bite herself or pull her hair out. "You feel terrible," she added, getting to a point where she's so distressed and she can't tell you that the only option is to literally take a chunk out of her wrist. Lincolnshire County Council, LCC, has approved specialist provision, but Miss Halliday said she was told in April that all local authority SEN schools were full and the placement team would be contacting independent schools. Since then, she has been left in limbo with no response from the council. Martin Smith, LCC's Assistant Director for Children's Education, said over the past few years, the council has invested £100 million in improving and expanding Lincolnshire's special schools, creating about 500 additional places. Demand has been significantly higher than anticipated in recent years. Lincolnshire has seen a significant rise in the number of children and young people requiring support. The number of children with an EHCP has more than doubled, from 3,326 in 2016 to 7,899 currently. As a result, Lincolnshire's 12 special schools are now at capacity, and we are having to use a variety of provision to help meet demand. Finding an appropriate placement can be a complex process and does take its time. Dr. Hayat moved from West Yorkshire with her family and had been waiting since March to find her son a school that could meet his special educational needs. It's like he has been trapped in a jail. He's just been trapped at home. It's been a battle and it's been a living hell because I'm watching my son at home regress. His mental health has been going down. He can't express how he feels, but I can see that he's been wanting to go to school. He's been struggling with a lack of routine and being stuck at home. I'm just helpless as a parent, so all I can do is fight for him. She said she had begged the council for interim support. Recently she received 2.5 hours of home tuition over 4 days, but said it was not enough. Merlin Joseph, the Director of Children's Services at East Riding of Yorkshire Council, said around 3,500 children in the county had an EHCP. There is a national shortage of SEN placements, but we are pleased to have secured 2 new 120-place specialist preschools in Bridlington and Welton. The council has been working with Dr. Hyatt and her son now had a place with the correct provision. The BBC has said on-screen presenters are regularly reminded of its guidelines relating to clothing after an incident in which Gary Lineker appeared to breach those rules by wearing outfits from his own fashion range. During England's opening Euros game on Sunday night, the Match of the Day host wore a green t-shirt and jacket which appeared to be from the next range he endorses. The guidelines say that presenters must not appear on air wearing clothing which they have agreed to promote. Lineker has been approached for a comment but has failed to respond. The former footballer was fronting the BBC's coverage of England's match against Serbia, which the Three Lions won 1-0. He sported a pale green knitted t-shirt before putting on a sage green jacket at half-time. Both items resemble the clothing from the Next X Gary Lineker collection, which is promoted as being edited by the legendary man himself. It has not, however, been confirmed that this has been the case, but a spokesperson added presenters and contributors provide their own wardrobe and all contributors are regularly reminded of the guidelines in relation to clothing, even if they are not doing proactive promotional work. Lineker has been criticised in recent years for speaking out on political issues, notably the government's Rwanda policy. His comments led to a debate about impartiality rules and BBC presenters' behaviour on social media. The guidelines and conflicts of interest state presenters of other individuals must not appear on wearing clothing or using products or services which they have agreed been contracted to promote, advertise or endorse in which they have a specific financial interest. Senior doctors in England have accepted a pay offer from the government. It means specialty and associate specialists, SAS doctors, medics who have finished junior doctor training but are not working as either consultants or GPs have joined their consultant colleagues in ending their dispute. SAS doctors had not yet taken strike action but had been threatening to do so. The pay deal is worth up to 19.4% and includes reform of the contract and changes to career progression. The announcement comes ahead of a planned 5-day strike next week by junior doctors in the lead up to the general election. It will be their 11th walkout of the dispute. The BMA has asked for a 35% pay rise to make up for what it says is 15 years of below inflation pay rises. Junior doctors received a pay rise averaging nearly 9% in the last financial year. The dispute with SAS doctors has been rumbling on for a year. There are around 13,000 of them working in the NHS in England, the overwhelming majority in hospitals. Dr. Ujwala Mohit, chair of the BMA's SAS committee, said the deal marked significant progress in helping keeping more SAS doctors in the profession. We entered this dispute with the government almost a year ago, and today's result is a step in the right direction in restoring SAS doctors' value in the NHS. A combination of burnout, eroded pay, stunted career progression, and being taken for granted by the government has seen many forced to leave the NHS altogether. Many SAS doctors also suffer from gradism, the idea that because they don't fit into the traditional pathways, they are somehow not as important. Health Secretary Victoria Atkins said she was delighted with the result, calling it a fair deal for the taxpayer. And she urged junior doctors to call off their strike, saying she would get back to negotiations after the election. There is a deal to be done, she added. Pay disputes are also ongoing in Northern Ireland and Wales, although junior doctors, SAS doctors and consultants are currently considering a new pay offer in Wales. The Queen and the Prince of Wales have joined thousands of people for the second day of Royal Ascot. Pictures from the event showed Prince William wearing a top hat and morning dress as he arrived at the races in a horse-drawn carriage. The event, one of the highlights of the summer social calendar, is taking place over 5 days at the Berkshire Racecourse, and it's expected to draw more than 250,000 spectators from around the world. Arriving in the same carriage as Prince William were Queen Camilla and the Earl and the Countess of Halifax. The king, who is being treated for cancer, attended Ascot for the opening day on Tuesday, but was not at the event on Wednesday. Michael and Carol Middleton, the parents of the Princess of Wales, joined members of the royal family. On Saturday, the princess made her first public appearance since she was diagnosed with cancer, attending a Trooping the Colour to mark the king's official birthday. Ahead of the parade, the princess released a statement saying she had been blown away by the messages of support she had received since her diagnosis in March and had been making good progress but was not out of the woods yet. As anyone going through chemotherapy will know, there are good days and bad days. I'm learning how to be patient, especially with uncertainty. Taking each day as it comes, listening to my body, and allowing myself to take this much-needed time to heal. She added she was hoping to join a few public engagements over the summer. The Middletons' attendance at Ascot is also believed to be their first appearance in public since their daughter began treatment. In other carriages were Prince Andrew's daughter, Princess Eugenie, with her husband Jack Brooksbank, and composer Andrew Lloyd Webber, who on Monday was made a Knight Companion of the Order of the Garter at a ceremony attended by the King and Queen. Also at the event were the Princess Royal's daughter Zara Tindall, herself an accomplished equestrian, and the Duke of Edinburgh. Prince William later handed out prizes to the winners of the annual Prince of Wales Stakes race. The Post Office has launched an urgent investigation after it accidentally published the names and addresses of 555 postmasters prosecuted during the Horizon scandal. The company confirmed staff had shared personal details in a document on its website on Wednesday. The Post Office said it had referred itself to the Information Commissioner's Office over the breach. It comes as witnesses continued to give evidence at an inquiry into the Horizon IT scandal, which saw hundreds of sub-postmasters prosecuted for stealing between 1999 and 2015 due to incorrect information from accounting software. The data breach was first reported by the Daily Mail and led to an angry response from former sub-postmasters, with one telling the paper she was incandescent. Ron Warmington, the forensic investigator whose firm Second Sight was brought in to probe the Horizon system in 2013, told the Mail it was an extraordinary breach of confidentiality and another example of Post Office incompetence. The leaked document contained the names of 555 former sub-postmasters who sued the Post Office in 2019. In 2019, the firm agreed to pay them £58 million in compensation, but much of the money went on legal fees. In a statement, the Post Office said the document had been removed from its website. It said, "We are investigating as an urgent priority how it came to be published. We are in the process of notifying the Information Commissioner's Office, ICO, of the incident, in line with our regulatory requirements." An ICO spokesman said, "We have not received a data breach report on this matter. Organisations must notify the ICO within 72 hours of becoming aware of a personal data breach, unless it does not pose a risk to people's rights and freedoms." More than 900 sub-postmasters were prosecuted for stealing because of incorrect information from Horizon in what has been called the UK's most widespread miscarriage of justice. Many sub-postmasters went to prison for false accounting and theft, and many were financially ruined. After years of legal wrangling, the government said in January that it would swiftly exonerate and compensate those affected. Two former bosses from Fujitsu, the company behind the Horizon IT system, denied knowing about issues with the system at the inquiry on Wednesday. One of them, Duncan Tate, said Post Office bosses never escalated to me any issues regarding Horizon integrity. Indeed, I heard repeatedly that sub-postmasters' claims regarding Horizon integrity were unfounded and that the system was working well. Noisy nighttime walkers heading up Wales' tallest mountain are making life a misery for people living nearby, villagers have said. The number of people heading to and from Snowdon after dark is growing, say people living at the foot of the most popular path to the summit. CCTV from this month shows more than 100 walkers streaming down Victoria Terrace in Llanberis, Gwynedd, in the early hours, many wearing head torches and talking loudly. Erie National Park Authority said it was aware of the issues and was working with the local council, Sigdor Gwynedd, to find solutions. Christina Patton, whose security camera has recorded the nocturnal nuisances, said that the problem was common during the spring and summer. Other problems include visitors driving up and down the road looking for somewhere to park, drunkenness, littering, and regular instances of people using residents' gardens as a bathroom. I'm really happy for people to go up the mountain, but just be a bit quiet and respectful. Have a good time, but don't forget there's people who actually live here. Mona Hellfield has lived on the road for more than 40 years and said the problems have got much worse since the end of the COVID lockdowns. She believes a system of wardens could help improve and monitor people's behaviour, along with improved signs in the area. When you drive through a village and there's a sign that says 20 miles per hour, slow down, we need something that says, please be aware this is a residential area. The National Park Authority said that it was aware of the issues raised and recognised the impact and inconvenience they can have on the local community. It added, unfortunately, we have observed an increase in antisocial behaviour since the COVID outbreak, and it is disheartening to see some users are still not respecting the residents and local communities in Snowdonia. The council said we remind people planning to visit popular attractions and any organisation or charity organising an event to be mindful of local communities and to plan ahead. This includes not disturbing local people, especially late at night, checking the parking arrangements before visiting any location, disposing of their litter and controlling their dogs and cleaning up their mess. Secret documents show a scramble to safeguard critical public services from the potential collapse of tech giant Atos, which works with billions of pounds worth of government contracts. Files seen show work has been underway with consultants since January, aiming to limit severe implications to essential services by lining up alternative IT providers. The UK government outsourced IT services, including for NHS records and disability benefits, to the French IT giant's UK arm, which admitted being more than £3 billion in debt in April and is now undergoing financial restructuring. The risk assessments, first reported by iNews, shows the Cabinet Office and Ministry of Justice hired consultants to review the company described as in financial distress to ensure continuity of critical public services. There has been the unredacted files, which were mistakenly released into the public domain by the Cabinet Office in May, although hastily replaced with blanked-out pages. The documents reveal PwC was hired to work on a risk assessment project codenamed Project Aztec at the start of the year. Project Aztec is believed to refer to Atos, with Aztec Group understood to refer to its Paris-based HQ, and Aztec UK understood to be its London-based subsidiary. Atos shares tumbled in January as the group replaced its chief amidst ongoing struggles with debt, missed financial targets, and reportedly looked to open negotiations with creditors. Last week, the French government offered a £600 million, €750 million bid to buy the company's most sensitive businesses, and Atos accepted an 11th hour financial restructuring plan led by French investor David Layani. Back in January, the Cabinet Office asked PwC to assess what was likely to happen to government contracts if the wider company went under, and whether restructuring options being considered by the French government would include the financial rescue of the UK arm of Atos. According to the document, the government was seeking advice on the likely impact of Aztec UK and the His Majesty's Government HMG critical contracts in the event that any part of the Aztec Group were placed into an insolvency process. Review and comment on any financial support provided by the French government and whether this could be ring-fenced from the UK group, Aztec UK, which performs the services under HMG contracts. Atos has invoiced the government for contracts worth about £6 billion since 2016 and currently has more than 40 government contracts worth nearly £1 billion. The firm is involved in IT systems at the Ministry of Defence, the Ministry of Justice and the Home Office, including NHS health records in hospitals, disability benefit assessments for personal independent payments, PIPs, records for the Student Loans Company, and tax refunds from His Majesty's Revenue and Customs, HMRC. Jonathan Ashworth, Labour's Shadow Paymaster General, said the documents showed ministers needed to focus on major issues happening in the real world under their watch. He added the fact that a contract of such extreme commercial sensitivity was published by accident is not just evidence of breathtaking incompetence, it is also a disturbing indication that the grip the government should have on the issue is completely lacking. After 14 years of Tory chaos, it's time to turn the page and rebuild Britain with Labour. A spokesman for the Cabinet Office declined to name the firm known within government as Aztec, but said we undertake regular reviews of suppliers and on occasion will undertake further due diligence to ensure public services can be maintained in a variety of scenarios. A spokesman for Atos said he could not comment on this issue, but on the wider issue of the company's financial issues, he said Atos is currently undergoing a financial restructuring and reached an agreement with a consortium and its creditors, which will create a stable financial future globally and in the UK. The provision of services to our customers has remained unaffected, and we will continue providing high-quality services to the UK public sector as we have for over 30 years. The Conservative Party has yet to respond to these allegations, and the PwC has declined to comment. There are only 2 weeks to go until polling day, which means the stakes for tonight's Question Time Leaders special are enormous. Each of the 4 leaders taking part will have their own particular goals and a distinctive strategy for achieving them. We can't predict what questions they will face, but here's something you can be sure of to expect. Big eye-popping numbers repeated again and again, and once more for good measure. Of course, it's hardly unusual for political parties to spend election campaigns throwing around big numbers, but it's still been striking over the past month how persistently the biggest parties in particular have stuck to contested figures, even under a frenzied challenge. In the first debate of the campaign, just over a fortnight ago, the number of the night was £2,000. Rishi Sunak managed to answer almost every question, even one about his national service plan, by accusing Labour of preparing to drop a £2,000 tax bill on households across the country. Tactically, the repetition worked. It allowed the Prime Minister to grab hold of the debate, helped as the Labour campaign privately conceded by Sir Keir Starmer's failure to rapidly challenge Mr Sunak on the figure. It was the prelude to what has become the theme of the Conservative campaign so far, tax. Chalk that one up as a Sunak success. But just one hitch, the figure wasn't accurate, at least not in the way Mr Sunak and subsequently almost all of his representatives on the airwaves presented it. The Conservatives took the amount of spending they claim Labour hadn't accounted for and divided it equally between the number of working households, an undeniably crude method, and they attributed the calculation to independent Treasury officials. True up to a point, but some of the calculations didn't come from the Treasury, and those that did relied upon assumptions provided by Conservative political advisers. Separately, the UK's statistics regulator took issue with the implication that the £2,000 would all fall in 1 year. Actually, the Conservative claim is that it would fall over 4 years, so about £500 per year. Labour faced questions of their own over their use of statistics. They argued that the Conservatives' plans would put £4,800 on homeowners' mortgages. That's about as accurate as the Conservatives' £2,000 claim, which is to say, not very. It's based on a dossier Labour have compiled of what they call the Conservative Party's wish list of unfunded promises. Firstly, it commits exactly the same sin deplored by a statistics regulator, rolling multiple years' worth of figures into one large sum. It ignores fixed-rate mortgage holders. It assumes that any shortfall in the Conservative plans would be funded solely by borrowing, and it assumes, perhaps most controversially, that while the Conservatives say they would save £12 billion a year from welfare spending, they would in fact save absolutely nothing at all. At the risk of sucking you into an infinite vortex of inaccuracy, it's true that the Conservatives' £12 billion figure is itself very questionable, but it seems even more questionable to suppose there is nothing at all they could cut from the welfare budget. It is just Labour and Conservatives willing to gloss over such details to come up with eye-catching claims? Of course not. Reform UK has pledged to eliminate £50 billion of government waste as part of a package which the Independent Institute for Fiscal Studies said simply does not add up, even if you accept their extremely optimistic assumptions about future growth. The Greens say they can raise £91.3 billion a year from carbon taxes, following a plan which experts say has come from sufficient detail. The Liberal Democrats say their promise of free personal care for older and disabled people will be funded by taxes on the big banks and billionaires, but whether this will raise enough to cover the pledge is also questionable. In other words, there's plenty to unpick in lots of what the campaigns have said, but the parties know this and they still believe it's worth it for them. Why? Ask Michael Gove, the Levelling Up Secretary, who stood down from Parliament when the election was called, visited Conservative headquarters earlier in the week to give a morale-boosting speech to those working on the campaign. He said the debates of the £2,000 figure's accuracy had only boosted its salience, likening it to the furious row over Vote Leave's claims in 2016 that Brexit would mean £350 million more a week being spent on the NHS. Anecdotally, Conservative candidates say there is some evidence that Mr Gove is right, especially in more affluent parts of the country. It's working really well in the home counties, one minister told them. It's definitely prompting some second thoughts for people considering voting Lib Dem, because they're not that worried about a Labour government. But in the north, it's not working so well with switches to Labour or Reform. Labour insiders say there is little evidence that the Conservative focus on tax is harming them, but it was apparent that they feared it might from the speed with which Labour officials raced to counter the attack after that first debate. And just like the Conservatives, Labour's own contested claims are designed to amplify their core message. In their case, that Liz Truss wrecked the economy, and that full term of Rishi Sunak would do the same. If the directness of Starmer's approach causes unease among some in Labour, they can't say they weren't warned. 14 months ago, the Labour leader stood solidly behind controversial adverts claiming Mr Sunak did not think adults who had sexually assaulted children should go to prison. At the time, a senior party insider said the adverts had been a triumph, forcing the Conservatives to talk about what we want to talk about. As they enter the final fortnight, that's what all the campaigns want. Whatever the fact checks, whatever economists say, they want the centre of gravity of the whole campaign to be on their terrain. Whether all this corresponds and corrodes public trust in politicians and what they say, well, that's a question for another day. None of the main political parties has yet set out convincing plans on how they will improve the NHS, a leading health think tank says. The Health Foundation said on current spending projections there appeared to be a £38 billion a year shortfall in England in what would be needed by the end of the next Parliament. The think tank said that would put plans such as tackling the NHS backlog, improving GP care and redeveloping hospitals at risk. Neither Labour nor the Conservatives have said how much they will invest in the NHS, while the Liberal Democrats' pledge is well short of what the Health Foundation says is needed. These were the only three parties the think tank looked for at its analysis. Anita Charlesworth, a health economist from the Health Foundation, who used to be at the Treasury's Director of Public Spending, said the health service is in crisis, and all the main political parties have said they want to fix it. Yet the funding they have so far promised falls well short of the level needed to make improvements. Politicians need to be honest with the public about the scale of the challenge the NHS faces and the reality that an NHS fit for the future needs long-term sustainable investment. Honesty about this has so far been conspicuously lacking from the general election debate, with both the main parties unwilling to spell out the difficult choices on public spending and taxation that will confront the next government. The scenario we have set out is not overly ambitious. It is broadly in line with the pledge set out by the main political parties and public expectations, and assumes the NHS can deliver challenging improvements in productivity. The budget for the Department of Health and Social Care stands at nearly £190 billion this year, the majority of which goes to NHS England, with just under £30 billion going on things like training, public health and buildings maintenance. On the current public spending forecast from the Office for Budget Responsibility, the health budget will rise by 0.8% a year above inflation, meaning it will be receiving £8 billion a year more by 2029 to 2030. However, it could be higher if health was prioritised above other areas of public spending, which has happened over the past decade. The Health Foundation analysis says, taking into account changes in the size and health of the population, an extra 3.8% a year on top of inflation will be needed to improve the state of hospital buildings, reduce the backlog in treatment, and shift more care into the community. That equates to a boost in the budget of £46 billion a year by 2029 to 2030, leaving a shortfall of £38 billion. The think tank said that it is based on the NHS becoming more productive too. The Tories and Labour have only committed to above-inflation rises, while the Liberal Democrats have said they will increase spending by £8 billion across health and care by the end of the Parliament. Health is devolved, so it's up to the governments in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland to decide how much to spend on health from within the money available for public spending, which is largely determined by the Westminster government. Part of Stonehenge has been covered in orange powder paint by protesters. Two Just Oil campaigners sprayed the powdered paint on the historic site near Salisbury, Wiltshire, at about 12 p.m. British Standard Time on Wednesday. The move comes a day before celebrations begin for the summer solstice at the 5,000-year-old landmark. Wiltshire police confirmed 2 people have been arrested on suspicion of damaging the ancient monument. Just Oil said the orange powder paint was cornflour and it would wash away with the rain. The group named the 2 protesters as name Lynch, a 21-year-old student from Oxford, and Rajan Naidu, a 73-year-old from Birmingham. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak condemned the incident as a disgraceful act of vandalism. Leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer, said the damage was outrageous and described Just Oil as pathetic. Members of the public were heard shouting no and seen running to intervene as the campaigners ran up to the stone circle at the UNESCO World Heritage Site. Nick Merriman, Chief Executive of English Heritage, said the vandalism was deeply saddening. He said the stones are testament to the people's desire to connect to nature, and while he respected the rights of people to protest, he He hoped they would channel their activism away from museum sites in future. The correspondent Paul Clifton, the first reporter to get to the scene shortly after the incident, said the 3 stones closest to the public path were splattered with the powder. He added that many of the tourists visiting the monument were slightly bemused. Stonehenge managers and security guards are standing by the path. I've heard a suggestion that because it is powder paint and the weather is dry and sunny, it may perhaps be removed without lasting damage, but they will need experts to inspect the stone before forming an opinion. Just Stop Oil said that the motivation behind the incident was to demand the next UK government end the extraction and burning of oil, gas and coal by 2030. A spokesperson for the group said that continuing to burn coal, gas and oil will result in the death of millions. We have come together to defend humanity or we risk everything. Verbaden, councillor for Amesbury East and Bulford, arrived at the site a few minutes after the incident. He said many members of staff at the site were left shaken, particularly one who attempted to tackle a protester. Mike Pitts, archaeologist and author of How to Build Stonehenge, said the impact of the action was potentially quite concerning. He said that the monument has been fenced off for decades and the megalith's surfaces are protected. They are sensitive and they are completely covered in prehistoric markings, which remain to be fully studied, and any surface damage to the stones is hugely concerning. A rich garden of life has grown on the megaliths, an exceptional lichen garden has grown, so it's potentially quite concerning. The orange powder was removed from the stones using blown air, which has helped preserve the rare lichen on the surface of the stones. A spokesman for Wiltshire Police said, "We responded to a report that orange paint had been sprayed on some of the stones by 2 suspects. Our inquiries are ongoing and we are working closely with English Heritage."